looking at me separately. How many you read? We are being tape recorded
Yes,
by
we are.
you and by the camera.
Yep. Ready when you
Okay.
are.
So we'll start the meeting. Bob, would you lead us in pledge allegiance to the flag, please?
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Wakefield has a new member, Norma Joy. Would everybody please introduce
Hi,
themselves?
I'm Ann Walsh.
Donna Marie Courier.
Ralph Fogg.
Bonnie Sear.
Steve Brown.
Doug Shute.
Andy Crum.
Liz Snyder.
Michael Tercey.
Randy Banks.
Nice to meet you.
You test later.
Big one.
She didn't earn his swearing-in certificate, so. Any public comments? We have a guest from the DOE on Common Core State Standards, Heather Gage. Okay. Would you like the board to introduce themselves again, or you all set?
No, I'm okay. Is
All right.
all board members, or do we have any teachers? No, just board.
Just
Board
board
members.
members.
And or board members? I want to talk to you after the SROs. My boyfriend's an SRO, so I bet you guys know each other. Thank you for letting me come.
I talked to Mr. Tercey, and I saw some concerns in the last minute about Common Core, and I brought it to his attention, and he invited Mrs. Gage.
I can speak to it, Mr. Chair, if you would. I want to welcome Heather for coming here. Heather works for the Department of Education. She has actually been traveling around the state doing presentations for boards around the state that have questions around Common Core. She is a representative of the DOE that is really at the lead of Common Core within the state for speaking for the Department of Education. I've seen her present to a board, and she'll be giving you the facts around Common Core in the sense as to the state perspective, and here to answer any questions that the board will have. And I really appreciate you coming here, Heather, and taking some time with us and answering some questions after a brief presentation. So thanks for coming.
Thank you. Sure. So thank you all so much for letting me come and talk with you tonight. Yeah, actually, the one thing that I look forward to with board meetings is that it can be a two-way conversation between us. So my presentation is going to be very, very brief because I want to get to what those questions and concerns are. So again, my name is Heather Gage, and I've been at the department for about 4 months now, not very long, but I've been involved with the new standards movement that's been happening with states across the country since it started, and was able to come on board and help bring some of that knowledge to us. And we're still learning as we go, and I think that's the great process of education. In my history, I actually worked for the School Boards Association, so I had this was back in another state, but I had a great pleasure of working with folks that serve like you for about 3 years, and it was certainly a great journey for me. In my current role, like Mr. Tercey was saying, I've been trying to just get information out there for people who want it on Common Core, which is our new mathematics and ELA standards, English Language Arts. If I say any acronyms that I shouldn't be saying, please let me know. Sometimes we get engrossed in that. So. About 3 years ago now, the State Department of Education in New Hampshire, the State Board of Education decided to adopt new mathematics and English language arts and literacy standards. For many, many years, like many states, decades actually, we've had standards in place. And it was time to look at them to see what we can do better, knowing that there was a movement with other states across the country that we've been involved with for a couple of years prior to 2010, talking about how we can improve mathematics and English language arts, knowing that those are the gateway courses into college, and many business leaders had talked to us about how it's important for not only college but careers. and those kinds of things. And so through a process of working with several hundred teachers, not only across the country, but in New Hampshire, we actually have 2 authors that live in New Hampshire of the Common Core in math and ELA, so we're very lucky to have them here. So there's just been a lot of involvement. We've been involved with the New Hampshire Parent Teachers Association and a variety of other associations in looking at what these standards were before they were ever adopted. So come fast forward, after the adoption in 2010, we've been working, when invited, to come into schools and either through our partners or through folks that work with the department and provide some professional development, technical assistance, just conversations like we're going to have here tonight about what those new standards are. So if I could, I brought a presentation that I'd be happy to send electronically tomorrow that maybe we can get out to you all, just so you have that documentation for yourself. So I just want to keep my train of thoughts, because I can go everywhere with conversations, but there's a lot of conversation around the state, or actually around the country, that may not be truth. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what we believe, what we call myths that are happening with the Common Core, and to try and alleviate some of those fears, even though I know that we need to have further conversation about those as we move forward. One of those is that it's a federal intrusion, that the feds said that you have to do X, Y, Z, and that's actually not true. It was I was involved in the state-led effort for a very long time. We've been doing, like I said, standards-based education for probably over 20 years now, if not longer, in some states. And what we've done is we've looked over all of those decades of research and learning and said, okay, so what's next? How can we work with our business community and our colleges to find out what are the best standards moving forward. And so that's how the conversation really started between states on those kinds of things. And it was actually, to be honest with you, a conversation that we've been trying to have for probably since the 1980s about this, and we never really could get our act together as states to start working really collaboratively together. The thing that's different in New Hampshire is, or in the New England states, is we've been working collaboratively with other New England states for a long time. NECAP is a perfect example of how we've done that. So we were really good leaders in that effort to show the rest of the country how you can work together as states and still respect the state values and those kinds of things.
Does it have federal funding that may be a thread that would say, there's federal intrusion? Is that one of the reasons why there's fear of federal intrusion?
Sure. Because
there's federal funding?
That's a great question. I'm really glad that you asked that. Did you say thread or threat?
Thread.
Okay, so it could be either, but
yes,
no.
It could.
Actually, so where I think when I look at the different writings about that particular question, I think where that came from is, you remember way back when the states were invited to participate in Race to the Top. If you remember that big funding thing with when the Obama administration first started. And what happened was, within that, they talked about common standards that were developed among a majority of states. So about, I think it was maybe 8% of the points that you could receive was within that. There was another option to choose by working with your higher education entities and those kinds of things, that you could still get the points on in those. So even though it was included in that, it didn't mean that you couldn't get the grant. There wasn't any where you would lose money if you didn't adopt the standards and those kinds of things. So money actually isn't tied at all to the Common Core standards. So the other question that usually goes along with that is, are we required as local boards to adopt the Common Core standards? And actually, you're not required to do that. The state is required to have standards in place because we are required by federal and state law, just like you are with the assessment side of it. But because the state has to have those assessments developed either through partnerships or on our own, of course it's more economical to do it in partnerships like we did with NECAP. What we've decided is that the mathematics and ELA standards that came out of the Common Core, we felt were rigorous and provided that depth of knowledge that we want our students to know in the state. And so we went ahead at the State Board of Education and adopted those. So.
Thank you.
But I also want to say that we think of the new mathematics and ELA standards like we always have. They're standards that we've had in place that fall under what we call the New Hampshire College and Career Ready standards. Now, we have to do a better job in some of our other subjects, and so we're starting to think about how we can make sure that we upgrade our science standards, our social studies standards. We actually have somebody on our staff that is the lead in updating our arts standards. To make sure that those are college and career ready for make sure we have a holistic education for students. And so we're looking at all of our standards, not just mathematics and ELA, about how we can update those. And so it all falls, if you think of an umbrella of New Hampshire College and Career Ready standards, and underneath that falls the different content areas. And those, provide guidance, provide a roadmap, if you will, for districts and schools and classroom teachers on what students should know and be able to do by working with educators on what those standards should be. It does not, another myth, does this mandate what teachers, how teachers teach in the classroom. And it's the what, not the how. So it's what students should know and be able to do. It's not how they should teach in the classroom. That's what we call curriculum. Sometimes you hear people mistakenly call it the Common Core curriculum, and that actually that's a false statement. Really, it's the Common Core standards. And so just like we always have in the past, you have your standards, and then the teachers in the schools and the classrooms, they take those standards and they start developing what the curriculum will be behind that. So, yes, sir.
I have a question for you. Now, how do you find where our children are at in the system? You must have to take a test.
So, sure. So just like always, we have NECAP, right? And we actually will be moving in the spring of 2015 to something we call Smarter Balanced. If you guys have been involved in those conversations, you know that there's two consortiums that are working on assessments based on the new mathematics and ELA standards. So for the first time, we're able to use that economy of scale and say, okay, we have most states, not all states, but a lot of states have adopted these new mathematic and ELA standards, and so we can work all together to develop what that assessment is going to look like. And what's really cool about this assessment is that it's actually very interactive. It's online. We'll still have paper form for about 3 years, although we're going to do everything we can to encourage and incentivize people using it online. The reason why is because when they take that test, if they go into a question, let's say a third grader goes into the question and they're answering a question that's based on a particular standard for third grade, and they don't do well on that question, what it's going to do is it's going to bounce them down to a second grade question based on the same topic and content area to see how they do. What that does is, and also if they do really well on it, then it's going to bounce them up higher to see how they're doing. What that does is it provides the teacher formative knowledge on how each of their kids are doing. And we'll be able to compare that to other kids of like grades around the state and actually or even around the country. That provides just amazing opportunity for teachers to really focus in on their instruction, which is what teachers have been asking for years.
So you actually almost like you're going to an adaptive.
It is. That's exactly what it's called. Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you find that our students are what they're supposed to be, does that mean we're going to have to change our books or our curriculum?
Well, if you find I would actually forget about the test for a second.
Okay.
So whenever you look at new standards, right, then educators within a school, within a district, within an SAU, are going to want to look at the different instructional materials they have. It may be textbooks, it may be other resources, the online resources and those kinds of things, to make sure that there's alignment there. A lot of times there will be, a lot of times there won't be. It just depends on where you are in your particular district. There's no way of me being able to say, yes, Milton School will have to do X, Y, Z, or Wakefield School will have to do X, Y, Z. But if all you educators in your system will be able to look at that and do a crosswalk to see where they are as far as instructional materials are concerned. And so you actually may know a little bit more about that than I do at this point. But it's a great exercise anyway for educators to go through from time to time, even if the standards don't change, but certainly when the standards do change. Yes, sir.
You said a majority of the states. Is this really a national standard? And also not, but you also said that we do not have to adopt Common Core, but the state chose to. So can you explain how that would work?
Yep.
If we don't adopt it, but the state has?
Sure, absolutely. Those two great questions, and I just slipped on the first one. National.
Yeah.
National standard. So we're very, very careful. this is New Hampshire, very locally governed, and we value that. We value that at the State Department, for sure. I value that as a person, and being from the New England area, I think it's very, very important. So when you say national standards, if you mean that a group of states got together and developed these standards, then if we want to call that national, that's okay. I would call it state-led standards. Just so we're very clear that it's individual states that came together for a common purpose, as opposed to federal, which would be government-driven, if that makes any sense.
So this has nothing
separate
to
things.
do with the Federal Board of Education?
No, actually don't know if there is a federal board of education, but it doesn't have to do with the Department of the U.S. Department of Education requiring that we adopt the Common Core state standards. What they do require the state to do is they do require us to have standards in place. That goes back to the 1960s with the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. So we have to have standards in place for schools to choose to, to guide them. The reason why that is because they're with No Child Left Behind, which is with the reauthorization of ESEA, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. So we have that. With that came the state assessments that had to be implemented. There has to be standards in place in order for the state assessments to be developed, so that we know how to measure what students know and be able to do, right? And so the state has to adopt, especially in mathematics and ELA, in English Language Arts, but also in science, we have to be able to have standards in place for those so that our assessments are aligned for that. So going to your second question, what's required of us as far as the developers and implementers of the state assessment, but also required at the local level for participation in the state assessments. So what is required on your end is to ensure that all of your students are participating in the statewide assessment. That statewide assessment, because we have adopted the new mathematics and ELA standards, will be based on that. Okay, so my caution to districts, to boards, is you can adopt the Common Core or not, but your state assessment that your kids will be taking will be based on those. So if, for example, you feel that your standards right now that you have adopted as a board are superior to Common Core and they're going to get to that depth of knowledge that you need to be able for your kids to do well on those assessments, there's nothing in law that requires you to adopt the Common Core. Does that answer the two questions?
But that won't affect our money from the state or the federal level in any way.
You do have to take the assessments or you're at risk of losing your federal funding,
You may
but
take
not
the
the
test.
Common Core. You will not lose funding if you don't adopt the Common Core. No.
Anybody else?
Yeah, actually, how I really don't feel comfortable because New Hampshire standards are not up to other states of superior standards. How do I know that the Common Core will bring New Hampshire or Milton and Wakefield up to a better standard? Because in New Hampshire, it stinks.
Okay, so what we did, that's one of the reasons why we actually, one of the reasons why we actually adopted these two content areas with this with the state-led movement, is because we felt that by working through that process of developing those, they took the best standards that were occurring in states and around the world in these two, in mathematics and ELA. And so what we did was took your exact concern and put that into practice. And so what you see in the new mathematics and ELA standards are that increased level of rigor that happens.
In what states? Does it bring it up to the regions in New York and California?
New York adopted them, California adopted them. You'll give me a line here, but there's 4 states that did not adopt them for political reasons. And so and there's 1 state that adopted the mathematics but not the ELA because there was something that forbid them to do that kind of thing. But every other, so California, Massachusetts, New York, all of those that have been said for many, many years that they have the highest standards have all adopted the Common Core.
Is Kentucky in on that?
Yep,
Because
they're
I have
actually one of the
grands-
first to adopt.
Because I have grandsons,
Yeah.
and it's far superior than
Yep,
New
that's-
Hampshire.
Yep, and using their educators just like we did, they adopted the Common Core, but they did, a process just like we did. We sat down with educators in the state and we said, what do you think about these? Do you think we should adopt them? They went through that same process. So now they're doing the same standards we are.
So every area that's gonna adopt the same Common Core, if my child is here and
Yep.
I move to New York,
Yep.
we're not gonna have a problem anymore about what is taught at what grade level?
Right, I would say that's correct. That was the whole vision behind working as states together. The only caveat I would get is if, let's just say, Nottingham Elementary School in Hudson decides that they're not going to use the Common Core standards, and that kid were to move even to Manchester, who did adopt the Common Core standards, there wouldn't be alignment there. But if you have a state where they don't have as much local value on governance, or local governance value, I should say, then you may have a kid that lives in Memphis, Tennessee, that moves to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they're right on the same schedule. So New Hampshire's just a little bit different that way, where we allow local boards to make the decision on whether to adopt. But the whole purpose, really, or the whole idea behind the Common Core is it would eliminate those barriers for students who may have to move a lot, especially our military students and folks that have businesses that move. Absolutely, great
Now, the
question.
states that didn't adopt it was Texas, Virginia,
Yep.
Indiana, Nebraska.
Thank you. And there's one state, Michigan or Wisconsin, that only adopted one.
Minnesota.
Minnesota. I knew it was
Yeah.
one of those anyways.
Anybody else?
Well, yeah, actually, I don't claim to be an expert on Common Core, but from what I've been looking into, what I'm getting out of it, Common Core is attempting to teach children what to think, not how to think.
Actually, it's quite the opposite.
I don't see that.
Okay, and maybe we could walk through some of those pieces individually at some point. But the actual purpose for the Common Core is to develop that critical thinking skills. So what it does is it looks at fewer standards that are the most important for kids to know and really dives deep. And they don't move on until they really get that information. And that's what the whole adaptive assessment is all about, is to really measure that depth of knowledge that the kid was able to receive.
I don't see it. I don't see it.
In order to do that, how often would you have to give you a test within a year to see if your child is progressing?
Another great question. So there's a statewide assessment that will happen once a year, and we'll be moving that to the spring. We'll have as long as all the timelines work out and everything, our last kneecap assessment will be this fall. Then the next assessment that the kids take will be, for the statewide assessment, will be in the spring of 2015. But throughout the process, what Smarter Balance, with our partnership with them, what they're developing are these formative assessment pieces that will go along with the formative statewide assessment, so that teachers can assess how the kids are doing along the way. Remember, we used to take spelling tests every week. Kids still do that kind of thing. Well, it's going to be similar to that, but a little deeper, or a lot deeper knowledge that teachers will be able to access. So we're working on the development of those pieces. Do we do NEWA in the SAU? Okay, so there's another assessment that is formative, that assesses kids in a formative way to help with instruction. It's called the NEWA, and I'm going to
Northwest
West,
Evaluation
yes,
Association.
thank you.
And correct myself, we have it at Newt.
We do. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Great.
In
Good.
Malta.
Good. So there's a variety of different kinds of assessments that people already do, and the only reason why I brought those up is because there's knowledge in the state that if you ever wanted to do something in the meantime before that all was developed, then there's other opportunities that we could certainly connect you with people, and if Newt's using that, that's a perfect resource.
And how do we know that our teachers are teaching these new standards for the children to get it?
So that's that's the main purpose for the assessment, and also your evaluation process that you put in place with your school, because of the state law requires evaluations. So that the walkthroughs that the principal does and teacher leaders and those kinds of things will also be looking for, if you were to adopt the Common Core, would be looking for that depth of teaching.
Well, see, I'm not
in your
always
classrooms.
comfortable with teachers evaluating themselves.
No. So you, depending on how your school is structured, in some schools, principals do walkthroughs. Sometimes there are instructional leaders at schools that do walkthroughs just to see how things are going in the classroom and those kinds of things. And actually, peer evaluations are proven to be very, very successful in improving instruction in the classroom. But that's one way of seeing if the depth of knowledge is occurring.
Did you say there's testing every year?
Same as we always have, yep.
Well, I thought the way it was now is what, 4th, 8th, and 10th?
No,
grade?
it's 3 through 8th grade and once in high school. It's been that way for 10, 12 years. Something.
So how do you stop teaching to the test?
Well, so that's a great question. You shouldn't be, I mean, the fact is that the standards are the assessment is based on the standards. Okay, so the teaching to the test isn't necessarily a horrible idea if you're teaching the standards. So you want to be teaching the curriculum that you've developed based on what students should know and be able to do that is outlined in whatever standards that you have adopted. So if you're focused on instruction, that assessment is going to come right along.
So in other words, the staff is not going to be able to teach to the test because they're not going to see the test. Is that right?
Well, there's test items that just so that this has happened with NECAP as well. There's test items that they can go through and they can see, how is this going to be structured and those kinds of things. But the teaching to the test piece, it's using your best instructional practices in the classroom to make sure that students know what they should and are able to do things to that deep level that we want them to be able to do. And if they're focused on that instruction, and I believe that the majority of our teachers are, then the kids are going to do much better on the assessment. The assessment is that afterthought, if you will.
I know the years I spent as an SRO would walk around and kids were bored in school. Kids were, teachers had to teach this line of sight, and they couldn't deviate from it.
Right.
So many times things are getting canceled out, voided, so on, because of No Child Left Behind. Our teachers going to be able to teach kids to start, and this is what I say, kids are taught to memorize, they're not taught to think.
Right, which is what this is.
Is this going to start getting them to think? Because when they go off into the real world,
right,
if it's not in their little box,
right,
they don't know what to do.
Absolutely. So I'm really glad you brought that up. I've got one example that I want to share with you from a teacher that I talked to. And actually she came with me to another board meeting that we had. Her name is Bethany. She was a teacher of the year. And she is actually a science teacher. And she was talking about how she uses the Common Core literacy component to help her kids read better in science. Because, there's all the instructional materials and that kids have to be able to look through. And she said what she does to make sure that kids aren't bored and that those kids who may have a difficult time in science is really learn more about what her students love. And so, for example, she was teaching, I'm going to forget what it was, let's just say it was the amoeba or something, right? So she's teaching the amoeba, and she knew that in her classroom she had a student that wanted to be a journalist. She had a student that wanted to be in a band, and there was another one. I'm forgetting, but we'll take those two for example. So as she's teaching it, they're spending a lot of time on a particular topic so that they can get really deep and get that knowledge, because the next thing is there's that progression of learning, right? And so, but for their project, when they had to show that they mastered the learning of what she was teaching them, she enabled them to pick how they were going to report out. So that person who wanted to be a musician, who wanted to be in a band, they put a CD together and they sang about what they learned. Okay, that person that wanted to be a journalist, a Sports Illustrated or something like that, they talked about it in sports terms. And they were able to write about it and take pictures of it and all of those kinds of things and put together a great little journal, entry. One of them wanted to be a graphic designer, so they got online and they built this whole model, 3D kind of thing on that. Every single one of them showed how they learned about the amoeba, but they did it in different ways so they weren't bored. And so we're really trying to encourage teach, and they're doing that all over New Hampshire. I mean, really, I see it every day. I hear stories, amazing stories. Is it every teacher in every school in every classroom? No, but I truly believe we can get there, especially if we're working together and making that happen. And that can happen with whatever standards that you adopt, but it certainly has great potential with the Common Core. Absolutely.
Thank you.
We need to do more of that, especially in math.
Anybody else?
Is it gonna be encouraging kids to, shoot for the stars, basically, go above and beyond?
I hope that we're
There.
doing that anyway,
Yeah.
no matter what. The standards aren't the panacea. They're, no matter what standards we have in place, they're not the golden nugget at the end of the rainbow or anything. I bet you can think of your favorite teacher that you had in school, and that the reason why that teacher was your favorite is because they really made you feel like you could do everything possible. And we hope that every one of our kids are experiencing that kind of learning in their classrooms. But because this talks about fewer, clearer, deeper standards, so that kids can learn, it really embraces that opportunity to do that, I think. And I'll tell you, just in full transparency, I work for educators, and I learn a lot from them, from teachers all over the state and people that are educational leaders. And that's what I'm hearing from them that are in the classroom, that are in the schools, that are developing this. That this really feels like the right way to go. We're still in the infancy phase of it. And we'll continue to get better and learn from it. But that's what we're hearing from educators.
How is this different from No Child Left Behind? No Child Left Behind started out good. It was a good idea,
Absolutely.
but here we are, what,
Right.
10 years or more
Yeah.
into it.
Yeah.
It's not achievable. So,
Right.
I mean, are we getting right back into another No Child Left Behind at the beginning?
Sure.
It sounds like all, roses and everything's, and then
It's hard work.
10 years from now, we're gonna be right back to where we were with No Child Left Behind.
Well, I hope not. I do want to make one clarification. So we've got No Child Left Behind, which is the policy that's 2,000 pages or something like that, about all the different titles and all of those kinds of things. And we actually applied for a waiver for some aspects of No Child Left Behind. For example, we know that we no longer are going to be doing what we call AYP. Is that a familiar term, annual yearly progress? Instead, we're going to be measuring against more achievable but still rigorous annual measurable objectives. And the new report cards, the profiles that the state provides for all districts, that's on our website. When we do the update of that, we'll put the new AMO targets in there so that you'll be able to see for the next 6 years. But it's much more achievable, to use the word, right? So we've got No Child Left Behind. That there's still a lot of those pieces that are still in place, making sure that we're not leaving behind our subpopulations and those kinds of things, right? So those good pieces are still there. Making sure that we have funding for our most needy children, our EL population, and those kinds of things. And then we have a separate bill called the Individual Disabilities Education Act, the IDEA, for our students with disabilities. So with those two, we're still focused on the important things. Now, within No Child Left Behind, one of the pieces in there is standards and the assessment piece. That's just one of the little pieces within No Child Left Behind, or ESEA. Okay, that is. So when we say is no child left behind going away, it actually isn't. We've received a few waivers from provisions of it, but the standards piece and the assessment piece, that didn't go away. And so that's why we still at the state level still have to make sure that we have good standards in place and that we have assessments to be able to deliver to schools. Does that make, there's just, so No Child Left Behind is still there, but we have new standards for mathematics and ELA. So, but we try to, through our waiver, we tried to focus on the things that we feel are most important, get away from all the gobbledygook that happens, although we didn't get as far as probably most people want, but we tried. We'll keep trying.
But this Common Core is going to serve all our students, isn't it?
Absolutely.
The whole spectrum.
Absolutely. That's the great part about it, is it really provides the opportunity to get deep for all kids. Absolutely. Good point. Thank you. I'm always available, email, phone. I'll leave some business cards. They're in my car, actually, so I'll run them back in. But if you ever need anything, just let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I hope so, yeah. I may, call the school. No, I'll be okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I'll
you
bring in
very
some
much.
cards and put them over here, okay?
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. The non-public minutes were sealed. I'd forgotten that. I didn't remember that. So we just got the regular minutes.
So we'll have those at the next meeting?
They've been sealed.
We'll still have to approve them.
I told I couldn't look at them.
You would have to make a motion to unseal them
I have
to approve, if you wanted to.
Is that
Or you
what
could
we-
approve and seal.
Okay, well, that's what I'll have
Well, I think we should. And what if there's a mistake in them?
to. I don't know exactly what's in it. Then I'm gonna need a motion to unseal. Well, let's deal with these first.
Okay.
You should probably do that in non-public, man.
I think we have to do it in public and then go in.
Has to be done in public.
What's that?
Has to be done in public to
To
make a
open 'em
motion
up.
to open them up.
Well,
Then
right,
close it.
but to actually discuss what's in there,
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Does anybody have any corrections for? Ralph, did you get your report from Mr. McIntyre and Mr.
No, I did not.
How do we resolve that? It's be on the third page, about
Yeah,
the third way down.
yeah,
The sentence all by itself.
I think I was asking for what Scott had talked about also, but
Yeah.
maybe not, Well, yeah, I was. Scott's-
You have to talk to, I can't remember exactly. You'd have to, I don't know how we deal with that.
I don't know.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
just curious of the reports themselves that I'm.
Yeah, he had talked about, there was one thing in particular that I was really interested in. It's hefty. Might have been the second one that I was most interested in, but it just seemed that what he was going over was quick and brief, and kind of wanted something to sit down and study or read afterwards. I mean, I'm not sure what I should ask for, or who I should ask, but it just thought it was something to study.
I just had one small correction of Scott Ruing's name on page 4 in the middle of the first paragraph. And that was it. And I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, I need a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
9 yes and 1 abstain. Okay. Financial statement? Did everybody get the email where they took the money from them 2 positions? The superintendent and what was the other position? I'm not able to copy it off my computer. There was one other position. Go ahead.
It was an email that went out regarding the $3,000 for the superintendent position,
Yeah.
as well as the, did we receive the invoice from the New Hampshire School Boards Association for
Yeah.
the search, and where those monies were coming from.
Okay, that was all.
Those are the 2 items.
I believe I saw the email.
I'm sorry?
I think I saw the email.
Okay, just want to make sure everybody got it. So right now we're under budget then, for the SAU then. I read it, what, 76, 81, 97? Even though we took the superintendent search out of here, and, okay. That's good. Anybody else have anything else? Do I need a motion to? Do I need a motion to accept this, or we also? No, okay, set it aside. Now, we got the revenue and then expense variations. Anybody looked at that? All set? Okay, I guess I need a motion to go into non-public.
Motion.
Andy, second.
I'll second.
Ann, Ann,
Yes.
Donna Marie,
Yes.
Bill,
Aye.
Bonnie,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Steve,
Yep.
Doug, yes.
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 Lou? Okay, we're in non-public.
Well,
Oh, I think we have one correction.
yeah, you probably should say what you're going into non-public for.
There's 3 of them. Steve thinks we have to correct C. I mean,
Yes,
to a C.
Yeah, and personnel is actually C under 91A, if I recall correctly.
So there's 3 of them, 91A, 32A, 91A, 32B, and 91A, 32C.